Hello and welcome to The Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, I'll be bringing some of the very best interviews and reports from this week here on our station. This week we speak with the man behind the visual effects of the Oscar-nominated The Substance.
It really helps to be sucked into the craziness and the organic craziness of the story and the movie.
Plus, Sabato de Sarno departs from Gucci.
It just goes to show that there's something broken within the broader system that can retain talent. So it's a bigger conversation as well.
All that and much more in the next hour here on The Curator with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. But we start the show with a highlight from the foreign desk. The idea of Rwanda invading the Democratic Republic of Congo looks on paper preposterous. However, as an alliance of rebel groups seized Goma, the biggest city in the DRC's east, we ask, what is the plan? Fred Baumer joined Andrew Muller with the latest from Kinshasa.
Fred, first of all, Goma, the centre of this week's event, is the city in which you were born and raised. What sense have you been able to get of what is happening there?
Well, yes, I was born and raised in Goma. My family is still living there. In the last week, Goma has been under attack by M23 rebels supported by Rwanda. Since the beginning of this week, what we are hearing is that a large part of the city of Goma has been effectively controlled by M23 troops. The airport is under their control, the border, the radio, and another part of the city. There are images that we start seeing from Goma with a lot of dead bodies in the streets. The clashes between the army and the M23 has caused many deaths in the city.
And in Kinshasa, which is obviously an extremely long way away from Goma, the Democratic Republic of Congo is an absolutely enormous country. Is there have been reports of various attacks on embassies, but that aside, is there any real concern about the prospect of this war coming to Kinshasa?
Well, what we need to understand is that in the Congolese history, every time Rwanda is involved in a conflict, it brings a lot of emotions. It reminds people the history of the last 30 years of violence, mostly supported by Rwanda or Burundi. And so there is a strong perception here in the population that the M23, which is also supported by Rwanda, has been able to control those areas because of the lack of actions from the international community. So every time M23 move and seize a large city, the public, and sometimes instigated or not, tend to go demonstrate or attack Western embassies, mostly because they believe some Western countries are supporters of Kigali's regime. Mm-hmm. So that explains why they choose France, for example, or the US or the UK and other Western countries. So it's a subject that people discuss in the streets, most in many places where you can go in Kinshasa. Now, are they really understanding what is happening in the ground with precision? I think that is debatable. No, there's not a lot of information, like a lot of accurate information going on in the Congolese media in Kinshasa. The Congolese government have been trying to limit to the maximum who is able to speak of what is happening in the East and what people hear. So even in the context of Goma, I've been around the city and you hear people questioning whether or not M23 are in Goma. Like, this is almost 3 days since they've been seizing and cleaning, to use their term, the city. So the people are concerned. I won't say people in Kinshasa are not concerned, but I think also most of time the level of information that they get is very limited.
How equipped is the Congolese state to deal with a threat like the one posed by M23 and various other rebel groups? I mean, in the last decade or so in particular, has it become more like an actually functional state that is able to govern the entire country or not?
I mean, the situation now is very different from where we were 20 years ago with the country completely divided in many armed groups. The country was relatively well unified. We had a lot of armed groups, mostly in eastern part of DRC. The current government has invested a lot of resources in the army. The question is how effective those investments have been made. The budget of the army went from something like 400 million to 2 billion. I mean, I know from the UK perspective, it's still very little, but from the Congolese budget perspective, it's a lot of money. And yet, on the ground, the results are still we haven't seen much of the capacity of the army to react. So there is a question of the effectiveness of security policies that the current government has chosen. And clearly, the Congolese army is facing a lot of limitations. Now, it's also true to say that in this particular conflict, the Congolese army is not only facing a small armed group, like there are hundreds. It is by UN reports and other reports, the Congolese army is facing a well-organized army. In fact, the support by Rwanda is very significant in explaining the progress of M23. There is increasing use of military technology, and that has limited significantly the capacity of the army to intervene, especially with Air Force support. So yes, the Congolese government has invested in the security. He had been trying to rebuild or to constitute a strong army. Those measures has not been successful to what we see. The Congolese government used also military mercenaries, if we can call them by their name, and that has been very questionable and not effective. But also this is also due to the support that M23 is receiving from Rwanda.
And now for more foreign desk news. Is there any truth to Donald Trump's claims that China controls the Panama Canal, or is he out of his depth? Following Secretary of State Marco Rubio's meeting with Panama's president, Andrew Mueller explains the U.S.'s rocky history with the country and its waterways.
Regular listeners to the Foreign Desk Explainer, like there are any other kind, etc., will recall that last week we did Greenland with regard to US President Donald Trump's coveting thereof. This week, it's Panama, and for much the same reason. So we should start by reassuring listeners that the Foreign Desk Explainer is not planning to pivot to becoming a weekly analysis of President Trump's proposed annexations and conquests. There will not be a Canada episode next week, or a Gaza episode the week after that, or who knows, a New Zealand episode the week after that, or a Pitcairn Island episode the week after that, or a Third Moon of Saturn episode the week after that. But Panama might be the one he is semi-serious about. Recently confirmed, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio made his first trip in his new role to Panama earlier this week. We shall return to this, but a brisk history lesson is probably in order first, by way of illuminating Trump's curious grudge against Panama. President Trump is, as we well understand, a man principally animated by a vast range of curious grudges, mostly rooted in some usually altogether imaginary slight against himself personally or the United States generally. Where Panama is concerned, it is all about Panama's canal, which Trump appears to regard as American by right. His case is, basically, America built it and that settles it. On the first part, at least, he is correct. In the early 20th century, shortly after Panama became independent from Colombia, the US bought, for $10 million plus $250,000 more a year, what would become the Panama Canal Zone, linking the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans and thereby sparing seafarers the long, arduous and frequently treacherous schlep around Cape Horn at the bottom of South America. A Panama Canal had been attempted before. France tried to plough through Panama circa the 1880s, but it had proved ruinously expensive and eventually unjustifiably dangerous. At least 25,000 canal workers were lost to yellow fever, malaria, and other hazards lurking in the Central American jungle. The US also spent a fortune and lost many lives, 5,609 of them, many immigrant labourers from various Caribbean islands, but they got it done. On August 15, 1914, the SS Ancon, an American craft belonging to the Boston Steamship Company, recently renamed for the new Waterways Pacific terminus, made the first official transit through the Panama Canal. However, the relationship between Panama and the US was frequently uneasy. The treaty signed by Panama and the US in 1903 awarded total control over the canal zone to the United States, which prompted considerable local resentment, not least as Panamanians struggled to perceive any economic benefit to hosting this American asset. In 1964, 22 Panamanians died in 3 days of riots, prompted by the refusal of Americans living inside the fortified canal zone to fly the Panamanian flag alongside their own.
We are here to participate in the signing of treaties which will assure a peaceful and prosperous and secure future for an international waterway of great importance to us all.
Successive US administrations grew to feel that running the canal had become more trouble than it was worth. It was President Jimmy Carter who in 1977 signed the treaty which would lead to the restoration of the canal zone to Panama by 1999.
That fairness and not force should lie at the heart of our dealings with the nations of the world.
It's a bad part of the Carter legacy, but look, he was a good man. I knew him a little bit, but that was a big mistake. Giving the Panama Canal to Panama was a very big mistake.
It is far from impossible that it is the very fact of Carter's involvement which vexes Trump. Of all the US presidents Trump considers his inferiors, i.e. all of them, his most seething resentments seem reserved for those who won Nobel Peace Prizes. But Trump claims that his concern is that the canal is now run by China and that Chinese troops have been stationed along it. Listeners may take a wild guess at the amount of evidence furnished for either assertion. It is the case that one Hong Kong-based company, CK Hutchison Holdings, does operate ports at both canal entrances, along with firms from the US, Singapore and Taiwan, but this seems an implausible casus belli. Nevertheless, the United States military does know the way. The US invaded Panama on Christmas Day 1989 to unload Panama's then dictator General Manuel Noriega. Though a long-time US asset stroke CIA stooge, Noriega had become a massive pest. He had been indicted on cocaine trafficking charges by American grand juries, was suspected to be double-dealing with the Cubans, and was attempting to overrule a presidential election in which Panamanians had declined to elect his preferred puppet. This intervention is chiefly recalled for the farcical scenes which ensued when Noriega sought refuge in the Vatican's diplomatic mission in Panama City. US troops, doubtless aware that the optics of blowing the gates off the papal embassy would be difficult, instead rigged up speakers and bombarded the opera-loving tyrant with noisy rock and roll, including Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, The Clash's version of Sonny Curtis's I Fought the Law, and, inevitably, Van Halen's Panama. Noriega eventually surrendered and spent time in jail in the US, France and Panama before dying in 2017, aged 83. Current Panamanian President José Raúl Mulino does not appear to require quite this level of persuasion. Following Secretary of State Rubio's visit to Panama, Mulino agreed to review CK Hutchison Holdings' operations at the canal and to end Panama's participation in China's vast global Belt and Road Trade Initiative, which is both a reason and a means for projecting Beijing's influence abroad. This is, probably, on balance, not a bad result, and Trump is entitled to call it a win for his dangling people out of the window approach to diplomacy. However, with due recognition that it feels like 6 months, we are only 2 weeks into his new presidency, and the difficulty with bluffing your way through politics is that someone or something is going to call you on it eventually. Though it would be understandable, all things considered, if Trump has come to see himself as an exception to this rule. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
And we're back with The Curator. Now for some breaking news in fashion. We get the latest from Monocle's fashion director Natalie Theodosi as Karen parts way with Gucci's design chief Sabato de Sarno after a short 2-year tenure. Let's have a listen what Natalie has to say.
We have been discussing all the breaking news throughout the year, and more than a dozen houses have been dealing with these exits, hiring, firing, but the reason I think that it's a particularly big deal with Gucci is that he has only been on the job for about 2 years, and there was such an investment in having him as the new face of the brand and really letting him steer the rebranding of Gucci. So I feel like it's a little too soon, and it just goes to show that there's something broken within the broader system that can retain talent. So it's a bigger conversation as well as the fact that he's exiting his position.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you think the fashion world's becoming very cutthroat? Because you're right, there was no time for him to mature in the brand. I mean, he's just done, a couple of shows. There was no time yet, to give him a little bit more kind of freedom artistically. But that's not how fashion's working these days, right?
Exactly. It's so numbers driven, I think, and having not gotten the immediate revenue rise that they were hoping for, they decided, I think, to end the relationship. But there's a lot more factors that go into a brand's success on the shop floor. First of all, for the first year, De Sarno's product hadn't hit the shop floor. So it's only been a year, and maybe even a bit less, that his designs have been on the shop floors. And there is questions of merchandising, of retail strategy to consider as well. It's not all on the creative director to determine a brand's kind of sales success. And to be fair, despite all the criticism, there were so many eyes on him. There was so much criticism from every part of the industry. But if you do have a look at what's in stores, there's so much inspiration taken from what he did. I mean, he started this story around the Ancora red color. And if you look at this season's collections, everyone has done a shade of burgundy in their collections. His re-editions of Gucci bags like the Jackie or the bamboo bag, the ballerina shoes that he's done for Gucci, they're selling out, the denim. So I think that it's quite a shame, because if he got some more time, he was starting to break through and to create this really beautiful, elegant uniform that was actually inspired by real life and real people. I loved that his first collection was inspired by the women of Milan, all these elegant people walking around Brera. So I think it's a disappointing move, but these things happen, right?
No, they really do. And what do you think Gucci will be looking out for? Clearly there was some issues there with Sabato. I mean, an early departure. Do you think they want someone perhaps a bit younger, or someone more who's been in the industry for a long time? From your conversations there, what do you see?
From what I could decipher from the CEO comments that were accompanying the announcement, it's that they still want to stand behind the rebranding that they started, which is all about offering a more minimal, modernist look, focusing on heritage styles and departing from that very maximalist view that Gucci was known for when Alessandro Michele was at the helm. So I think they will continue with that. There is a new executive team. The CEO, Stefano Cantino, is now kind of positioned the last year in the job. Francesca Bellettini, who was formerly CEO of Saint Laurent, is now overseeing the Kering Group. So I think they will steer a new strategy. They will continue with this more modern, minimal direction, but they might want someone that doesn't come. Sabato was a Gucci veteran working behind the scenes for years and years, but maybe now they want a star designer, someone who's going to bring their own audience and make bigger headlines.
Finally, Natalie, this is just a guessing game, but of course the fashion weeks will start later this month. Are we entering perhaps a more stable period, or will I have to keep chatting with you about all the breaking news?
I hope we're going to start seeing a more stable period. Definitely that's kind of the feeling that you get when you speak to industry executives. There was the whole conversation, especially in the last year, was this luxury slowdown after the immense growth that happened during the pandemic. So I think there is a course correction. Sales are picking up. And to be frank, I think everyone who was going to leave their job or get fired, it has all been done already. So I think we're going to see the new creative directors settle into their jobs and new chapters starting at a lot of these houses. Let's just hope that it's for the long term.
And now some culture news for you on the Monocle Daily. The Japan Foundation touring film program kicked off here in London this Friday. As the title suggests, the annual festival tours venues across the UK, from Plymouth to Orkney, showcasing the best of Japanese cinema. Monocle's Lily Austin spoke with Yunko Takanawa, the festival's founder and senior arts program officer, to find out more.
おきみちゃんは自ら女の幸せを捨てようって言うんですよ。私は今日まで清廉潔白であろうと生きてきた。だがそれは正しかったのであろうか。なんだその目は。
Japan Foundation Touring Film Program was established in 2004 in order to give the opportunity to expand the knowledge of the Japanese cinema. We started off with 3 venues in the UK, but ever since that, it has grown strength by strength, and it's now we have 33 venues in the UK for the 25th version.
And obviously we have many film festivals here in the UK. Why was it important for you for it to be a touring film festival?
Yes, the idea of this kind of program was from the beginning to give some more opportunity to people outside to they enjoy or appreciate Japanese cinema, because back then there was, of course, still is, London Film Festival, other festival there, but hardly any Japanese films were screened. And if they were screened, it's quite sort of limited. I wouldn't say expanded ever since, but, compared with people in London, where the people can enjoy the variety of the events associated with Japan, people in outside, London may be deprived of such opportunity. So, from the beginning, our idea was to give opportunity to the people outside London. We didn't, therefore, have London venue when we started having this. But later, London was added on. So it was actually meant to be for non-London people.
And in the 21 years that you've been running the program, has it changed a lot? And has the audience changed as you've developed the program?
In terms of structure, it has been always thematic. And also, I tried to put the mixture of that films, such as old film and anime and then contemporary release. But one thing is common is hardly ever be screened in this country, those films that we are showing. Audience-wise, of course, it's massively expanded as time goes by, of course, nonetheless. That's because screen numbers went up, venue shot up. Given that this year we got over 260 screenings during the 2 months' time from the February, March, you can imagine that compared with the starting time, 2004, of course, it's massively changed.
And in terms of, you mentioned there being a theme each year. This year's theme is justice, justification, and judgment in Japanese cinema. Those are quite punchy words. What made you choose that theme and what's its relevance?
Punchy, isn't it? Of course, they're kind of, wordplay, of course, nonetheless. But apart from that, I thought that it's very timely when we are living in an ever-changing world. I'm not going to the very political. That's certainly that moral or social norm has been shifting. There is a lot of people who are falling through the safety net. That feeling justice or having a justice is, I thought that was a fundamental principle of the human beings to feel happy. Given that all sort of situation around us, I thought this is a very good theme for this year's touring film program.
I definitely saw that. I was lucky enough to watch a couple of the films that you're screening, and A Girl Named Anne definitely has that kind of quality to it.
Indeed, yes.
The other film I watched was Bushido, and this is a historical drama. A Girl Named Anne is a bit more social realist and set during COVID. Yes. So obviously, as you kind of mentioned before, very, very different genres. What is the selection process for you choosing these films?
Well, of course, it has to be intuitive and you've got to be very resourceful. I normally watch around 70, 80 films.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really tough job, to be honest. And then, tenaciously making notes, then checking against that. Of course, balance between that films are also important. If you actually put together all similar sort of films, you may actually ended up, eliminating certain sort of people who had different taste. So under the same theme, I tried to mix from different kind of categories. For example, Bushido is certainly period drama, but yet made by that contemporary director, which is very interesting, sales point as well. And then Girls Named Anne, for example, is a very social, as you say, and also that's depicting that a social sort of situation around that unfortunate girls, named Anne. And particularly picking up the situation, what happened during the COVID lockdown period. Of course, nonetheless, it's very timely. I take that to sort of an example from the program, but there's other, selection like very fun film, also that other classic films who never been screened in this country, or all sort of a mixture, so that from the younger audience to the senior audience, or the family friendly, and also that those socially conscious person, all of them can enjoy. That's my actually fundamental way of selecting. Now, I wouldn't choose the film from that theme only, just in the variety of genre. But of course, most important thing is quality. I really check very thoroughly that how those films were received in Japan, internationally, whether they have been screened, if not to UK, outside Japan. Then that kind of sort of research I do. In addition to, I actually watch those films and then see to it.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
We're back with the curator. We have a highlight from Monocle on culture. The show had the delight of having the music legend Vashti Bunyan in the studio, ahead of the reissue of Look Aftering. On paper, what Vashti did in the late 60s sounds like the ultimate hippie dream. A young female songwriter leaves London for the Outer Hebrides with her boyfriend. The 650-mile trip takes 2 years. She makes an album about it, Just Another Diamond Day, a collection of gentle pastoral songs about living in and journeying through nature. Following the classic was Look Aftering, which was released in 2005. That album's being re-released with added demos, live versions, and a beautiful lyric booklet featuring paintings by Vashti's daughter. Robert Bound sat down with Vashti and discussed the impact of the 2005 LP.
Indifference is the hardest blow. It is the wind and icy snow that falls on green fields as they grow in winter.
And we should say in this beautiful new reissue, there's sleeve notes from you, and there's sleeve notes from Max, and there's also sleeve notes from Devendra Banhart, who also played on the LP. And I think Max, in his notes, in his sleeve notes, described it as it became a bit like a community project. He called it, which makes it sound a little bit municipal and sad. But I know what he means. It kind of what was it like? As I say, for the first time making music for the first time in 30 years, and suddenly you've got a retinue of people that love your work. But that's also a bit of a pressure for you, perhaps, having to work with these people. Maybe it's not. I don't know.
It never felt that at the time. It just felt that these people that I would have loved to have known when I was, back making Diamond Day. If people then had been as generous and as spirited as these people were, like Devendra and Animal Collective and Ardem and Max, that when we all started playing together, it just seemed so, so natural. And also at that time, it was a session in London when we were all getting together. Robert Kirby came, who was Nick Drake's arranger and who had arranged 2 of the songs on Diamond Day, 3. I hadn't seen him for a long, long time. And he came to play trumpet in French horn. And he said, "We're the survivors." Yeah. And that moment in that day, to bring him in to this completely new lot of people who clearly loved what he had done and was still doing. What a day that was, really.
Yeah.
Unforgettable.
And not wanting to sort of gild the lily, Vashti, but for Devendra Banhart and Adem and Animal and all the people that you've collaborated with, and you and Robert Kirby in the same room doing this stuff, they must have been wanting to touch the hem of the garment, really, right? I mean, that must have been a wonderful thing. What's the nature of the collaboration in the moment, actually? Like, is it as easy as everyone picks up their instruments and it flows, or is there a little bit of, picking your moment to do your thing?
Well, the song Wayward, we were all playing on that. I think Max was down in the studio working out a piano part for one of the songs, and Ardem and Devendra and the Vetiver guys, we were all upstairs trying to figure out how we were going to play Wayward. We went down into the studio and just did it. And it was so, it just took moments for it all to come together.
Yeah.
And I think at the time I probably didn't think anything of it. It was just, what we did. But when I listened back to it, that it was so unrehearsed and so perfect.
Yeah.
I really love it. And I'm so grateful to them to, again, just sort of let everything go, let egos go and just put it all together. That was a lovely day.
And there's a thing I wondered, it's wonderful to be able to have the chance to ask you yourself today, if the sound of the record is the sound of the recording of it, you know what I mean? It sounds, of your work sounds timeless and patient and crystalline. There's such gems of songs on your 4 records. And there's now 4th and a half, 5th and a half, And I wonder if there is a spirit in the recording of it that you capture there, or if it is a harder work than it sounds.
It's not hard work, that's for sure. And I'm much too lazy for things to be hard work.
going to mention you're 30 years out of the recording industry.
Yes,
no,
that's right. I don't know. It was. I think with Diamond Day, a lot of people have said it helps their babies to sleep because I was writing those songs to comfort me, and I think that maybe it comes across as being comforting. With the others, I'm not aware of how it comes together or how it sounds in the studio or how it even sounds once we've produced and edited it. Or even the mastering, mastering, look aftering was an incredible experience. I'd never really been part of that.
Yeah, was that not what happened for Diamond Day? You were sort of divorced from that process of it slightly.
Joe Boyd took the tapes away to America, and I didn't hear it for nearly a year. So this was completely new and wonderful to be part of it, I think. And I don't know if maybe some of that comes across that.
In a way, there's more you in this LP than maybe the first one.
Yeah,
it's a considered thing in a different way.
Yes, and also the fact that I was just completely filled with wonder that this was happening at all. That it was, an extraordinary thing to happen so many years later.
And now an interview that I was very excited to do. It was with Pierre-Olivier Persin, the special makeup effects designer for The Substance, the great film with Demi Moore. I had the pleasure to speak with him about the gory body horror satire that was nominated for 5 BAFTAs and 5 Oscars. And of course we discussed for how long Demi Moore was in the chair during the makeup.
People always ask for something new. It's inevitable. At 50, well, it stops.
Pierre-Olivier Persin from The Substance. Welcome to Monocle Radio. I loved The Substance, but I have to start with this because we've just got the news. You've been nominated for an Oscar for Best Makeup and Hairstyling. Where were you when you saw the nominations coming out?
I was on set. That's the place to be when you receive an Oscar nomination. I was on set. I was dragging a dummy around, a dead body.
I would expect this from you,
Yeah. And so, I was on set, and the first AD came to me and she asked me, "Did you hear anything about the Oscars?" And I said, "Yes, I have a nomination." And she said, "Oh no, I have to make an announcement." So she did in front of the whole crew, and everybody clapped, and that was great.
And I'm so happy because, for everyone that have seen the film, of course, the acting is amazing. Coralie, what a fantastic director. But, that side of it, the prosthetics, the makeup, hairstyling, everything, it's so important for this film. Was it perhaps one of the hardest projects from your career? I know you've been in this role for quite a while. Was that one of the most challenging one?
Definitely, yeah, for sure. That was the most challenging, demanding. It's always demanding. We love what we are doing. We are passionate about the work. So we always try to do our very best. On that show, we were making stuff, and then we were starting over again to do them better, and starting over again, back to the drawing board. And also Coralie really wanted to use as many practical effects as possible, which was great. She wanted really that organic, even old school from the 80s, but feel, but also very organic and feel to the audience. So I guess that's why she wanted really to rely on practical effects. And that was really great on her side to give us, it was really demanding. It was 24 hours, pretty not maybe 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for pretty much a year. And it's, I don't know if it's an overstatement. It's pretty close from the truth. But they gave us all the time we needed on set. They were never rushing us like, "Oh, quick, okay, you need time to do that. You need to shoot that in a couple of days, maybe because you can make it better and it does not work perfectly yet." go and do it and come back in 2 days, no problem. And so that is really rare, and that was awesome.
I love what you just mentioned about the organic feel of the film, because I've noticed that as well. And I think it's particularly challenging on the substance because the film, there are a lot of close-ups. I mean, you really see what's happening with their bodies. I mean, you can hide it. If you haven't done a great job, Pierre, people would notice, right? So I think you understood, because some films that perhaps they're a little bit darker, maybe you can't really see what's going on. It's not the case with the substance.
No, that's a very good point. I remember many things happen in the bathroom, and most of the most complicated scenes, effects and makeup effects, and they happen in the bathroom. So I remember during prep asking Coralie about the lighting in the bathroom, some shadows and some typical horror movies kind of lighting to help with the practical side of it. And she said, yeah, sure. And then, we arrived on set, and I discovered the harsh, very harsh lights and the white tiles, on the walls, reflecting all the light and everything. I knew about the tight close-ups, but so wow. And but I guess, like you said, it really helps to be sucked into the craziness and the organic craziness of the story and the movies.
And to prepare, for example, Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley for the, all the prosthetics, that must take quite a while. There must be quite a big part of their day. How many hours, for example, on a normal kind of day in the set they would take, especially Demi Moore, I would say?
Yeah. Demi had anything between 45 minutes to 6 hours, 7 hours, maybe for the longest. The usual day would be 3:30 to 5 hours of makeup.
And now a highlight from my show, The Stack, about the print world. This time, Monocle's Paris bureau chief Simon Bouvier paid a visit to the 52nd edition of the Festival International de la Bande Dessinée d'Angoulême, one of the world's leading comic book fairs. He spoke with Oscar Valiente, partner and general manager at Norma Editorial, Spain's biggest comic publishing house.
Norma Editorial is one of the biggest comic publishers in Spain. It's a company founded in year 77, so have a long history. It's a company that started as an artist agency working with Spanish artists that created illustrations, cover art and comics for publishers around the world, and soon started to do their own publications, doing those same artists on comic editions, but also translating for the Spanish market really important worldwide artists like Moebius, Enki Bilal, Hugo Pratt, Jacques Tardy, and more later Frank Miller, Mike Mignola, and then the manga. So we have a catalog in which we publish a lot of different kind of contents. We publish more than 500 books every year, 500 comics. We have also a big bookstore in Barcelona with more than 1,000 square meters. The distinctive of our company is that we work in a 360 business system in which we participate in all the areas of the comic production and distribution, because also we have also our own distribution company. We are one of the longest and the biggest publishers now in Spain.
And Spain is the guest of honor at this year's International BD Festival in Angoulême. Can you tell us about the significance of the festival in general for you and your publishing house, and then this year in particular?
Yeah, it is very important. We are also the founders of an association called Sectorial del Cómic. It's a very unique association because it's not composed only by publishers, but also by bookstores, artists, events, and all the kind of professionals connected to the world of comics in Spain. And our goal is to push the administration, the government, to improve the conditions of the market and the professionals of the comics in Spain. And being here in Angoulême is part of this strategy of the Spanish government that is reacted to our request for making more visibilization to the Spanish artists, because We have a lot of good Spanish artists working worldwide for the American market, the French market, but some of those markets don't know that some of the series that they like more comes from Spanish artists. So this is part of a strategy to say, hey, we are Spain, we are not big as the French market, but we have really talented artists.
How have you seen the kind of ecosystem of Spanish comic artists evolve in the time that you've been involved in comics? Was it mostly at the beginning Spanish artists who were working for foreign publications like American comics and maybe French bande dessinée? How have you seen it evolve into what it is today?
Yeah, the market evolved and changed a lot in the last 40 years because in the 70s, well, Spain have a tradition of more than 100 years of publication. As you can see here in an exhibition in Angoulême that makes a trip from the very beginning of the Spanish creators to today. And from the very beginning, the comic artists were really connected to the magazines in the newsstands. We had really important magazines in the history of Spain in the early of last century. And on 70s and 80s, new magazines like Metal Hurlant here in France appeared in the Spanish scene, and we had maybe 8-10 really important magazines in which you could find the works of Eiki Bilal, Moebius, but also the Spanish artists. But during the years 2010, those magazines started to disappear, and then the graphic novels started to be more and more important. So we moved from the newsstands, because in the newsstands were not only the sales of the magazines, but also the comics, the collected comics. We moved it to the bookstores, and the bookstores needed different kind of format, more pages, more graphic novel. Then a new generation of women artists also entered the market, and they changed it a lot. From creators that were really focused on a science fiction, fantasy for France, or superheroes for the United States, to a new generation that also continue working on those markets, but a lot of new artists with a really personal view, explaining stories with a lot of biographical contents related to the things that about the society is worried. So it changed a lot. Today we have a lot of artists working still for the superheroes market, for example, but of course we have a big quantity of really talented artists working with topics really, really different from the superheroes or fiction. Especially non-fiction is really healthy.
And finally, here on The Curator, we're heading to Sydney, one of the world's most multicultural hubs. The harbour city's diversity is reflected in its vibrant selection of global restaurants, cafes and bars. Here, Monocle contributor Adam Hancock takes us to Little Portugal in Sydney's inner west to learn more about its Portuguese diaspora and their delicious cuisine.
Over 18,000 kilometres lie between Portugal and the Sydney suburb of Petersham. But the culture of these two places brings them a lot closer together. New Canterbury Road may appear like any other busy street in the city's inner west. But if you look closely, it's filled with Portuguese businesses. From shops to restaurants and cafes, this is the place to visit for a taste of Portugal in the heart of Sydney. Before sampling some of the culinary delights that this neighbourhood has to offer, I wanted to find out a little bit more about why Petersham came to be known as Little Portugal. Here's Sydney Morning Herald journalist Eric Bagshaw.
The Portuguese, just like many migrant communities in Australia, really resettled after World War II. That was a huge wave of migration happened, and in that process, immigrants found new suburbs. And in the case of the Portuguese, it was Petersham. And from there grows restaurants, football clubs, and a sense of community.
Hello, Sam. Good to meet you.
Pleasure. Nice meeting you, Adam.
Have you been busy today, or?
On and off, yes.
I'm starting my Petersham tour in Charlie's Deli, a family-run business which started in 1980 and sells a whole range of authentic Portuguese products. The owner is Sam Santoro.
I'd say probably 6% of my customers are Portuguese. And then, I can't put a percentage on it, but the colonies, East Timor, Angola, Mozambique, Brazil to an extent. And then they've got the neighbours like Spain. And I get a fair few Europeans in here, a few Italians, a few French, yeah.
What sort of products do you sell here that are sort of uniquely Portuguese?
There's a lot of products, like from pastes and marmalades to olives. Delis are a dying trade because you've got your larger supermarkets, your chain supermarkets. So we're trying to be really specialised in products, in gourmet products and all that. So we focus on the codfish, bacala. That's the biggest seller in Petersham. I saw so much bacala. It's amazing. It's like they have a recipe for every day of the year. You speak to any Portuguese, they've always got something different to do with it.
So Sam, what are we looking at here now?
Okay, your gallo oils come in bottles, which are like the plain, the virgin, and then you've got your classical, and then you've got your extra virgin, reserva. You don't cook with reserva. That's more for salads and for dressings and all that. The other two you can use for cooking.
So these are very popular with your customers?
Very popular. Not as popular as Saloio, but if you're a Gallo drinker, you don't like Saloio.
Right.
If you're a Saloio drinker, you don't like Gallo.
Right,
it's like they go for their national teams like Benfica and Sporting. If you see someone wearing green, Sporting, and they won't wear red or blue.
Right.
Because they're the opposite team. So, yeah.
So they're very passionate about their oils, like their football.
Extremely passionate, yes.
Well, I've been walking down the main road here in Petersham and I've come across the Portuguese and Spanish butchery, and I'm just stood outside and I can see a huge selection of meats, sausages, pork chops, and there's lots of legs of ham and pork hanging from the ceiling as well, and then some traditional Portuguese goods as well. So let's go inside to take a look.
Olha, queria aquelas costelas que tem ali no sal. Uma costela.
Being surrounded by meat was making me a bit peckish for a meal that's quite unique in Australia. The Portuguese chicken burger. One of the places to go to grab one is Frango's, a restaurant chain which first opened in Petersham in 1989. Sadly for me, it was shut for summer break, leaving my cravings unfulfilled. Although it wasn't hard to find another chain, Oporto's, to pick one up on my way home. Anyhow, here's Eric Bagshaw again.
Many probably would never have heard of a Portuguese chicken burger, and that's because they're not really from Portugal at all. They were effectively invented in Sydney. What defines a Portuguese chicken burger is really the peri-peri sauce. And a peri-peri sauce was actually bought from the Portuguese colonies over to Africa and then incorporated with other dishes throughout the Portuguese sort of empire. And eventually some of that peri-peri sauce made its way onto chicken. And of course, what Australians decided to do is to combine peri-peri sauce with chicken and put it on a burger with a bunch of mayo, some lettuce, and a couple of buns.
Now, if you do pop down to Petersham for some Portuguese chicken, you might then be looking for a dessert to finish things off. And what better sweet treat than a Portuguese tart? Well, for the best pastel de natas in town, there's only one place to go, Sweet Belém Cake Boutique. I spoke to their owner, Jose Silva.
When did you get involved with the shop? Because it's been open for about 20 odd years now?
Yeah, so the shop was open in 2002. Right. I used to come here, buy the tarts and actually take it to my team. I think it's one of the best Portuguese tarts, if not in the world, at least out of Portugal. Wow. And then I really loved the product, and then I took over in 2012. And we've had it ever since.
And is there a sort of special or unique recipe that you use for your tarts that makes them so good?
Yeah, our pastry is amazing. And part of the reason we use butter instead of margarine to do our puff pastry. And then also our custard, we use real ingredients. We use free-range eggs, which I think is very important for flavour. Also, we use real vanilla. We infuse it with the custard with vanilla bean and lemon zest. And then cinnamon on top as well.
Okay. Well, I've had these in Portugal years ago, so it's time to put it to the test. That's really good. And you're right as well about the pastry. Yeah. It's a little bit thicker. Yeah. And you can really taste like that crunch in it.
Yeah, it's quite crunchy. It's always crisp, and that's part of one of our secrets as well.
And do you ever try and tweak the recipe, or is it always staying the same?
No, the recipe of the custard is, we don't tweak it. It's historical. It's historical. We don't touch that.
Sweet Belém is still very popular with not just the local Portuguese community, but also visitors from across Sydney. But one thing a few locals have told me is that Petersham is perhaps starting to lose some of its Portuguese influence, as people move away from the area and some businesses close down. Let's hear from Eric Bagshaw again.
I think it's a real battle for ageing migrant communities to hold on to that sense of place and sense of identity, because unfortunately as their children grow older, they sort of assimilate into wider Australian society, and that first generation Portugueseness could be lost. But they've probably done it more successfully than most. In Petersham in particular, you go to the local tennis club, to the Madeira Club, or to some of those venues, and you'll see that they've managed to really hold on to some of that old school Portuguese hospitality and Portuguese food, but also appeal to younger generations.
So whilst an afternoon in Petersham might not fully transport you to the streets of Porto or Lisbon, there's still plenty of Portuguese charm to be found. And I'll certainly be back to get my hands on a non-authentic Portuguese chicken burger. For Monocle Radio in Sydney, I'm Adam Hancock.
And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by David Stevens and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week, and thank you for listening.